So hello, everyone. Welcome to another insightful episode of Yale College Voices. And for those who don't know, I am your host, Darice Corey, and I'm thrilled to have you join me today as we spotlight incredible diverse roles and innovative projects that drive the heartbeat of Yale College. The podcast celebrates the kaleidoscope of talent that shapes the Yale College experience. And today, we're going to explore the world of academia, history, and social justice. And I have the honor of welcoming a distinguished guest whose work has profoundly shaped the Yale community's understanding of American history, particularly the experiences of African Americans and women in the 19th and 20th centuries. So our guest today is Crystal Feimster. So hi, Crystal. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. My pleasure. It's so nice to have an opportunity to chat with you. And I know we went through, we tried to schedule for a while. And I
Yeah.
I just appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit with me today. So, Crystal, I'm just going to read your bio for our listeners, and then we'll just dive into our conversation. So Crystal Feimster is an associate professor in the departments of African American Studies and History, and the programs of American Studies and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. Professor Feimster is a native of North Carolina, a historian of the 19th and 20th century African American history, U.S. women's history, and the American South. Her research on racial and sexual violence bridges the fields of social and political history to shed light on long obscured aspects of the American past. Exploring absences and asymmetries of evidence in the archival record, she draws on the resources of gender studies, critical race theory, literary scholarship, psychoanalysis to analyze some of the most elusive and traumatic facets of human experience. Professor Feimster earned her PhD in history from Princeton University and her BA in history and Women's Studies from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She is the author of the prize-winning book, Southern Horrors, Women and the Politics of Rape and Lynching, and dozens of articles and book chapters. She has published essays in the New York Times, the Chronicle of Higher Education, and Slate. Professor Feimster is currently completing 2 book projects, Truth Be Told, The Battle for Freedom in Civil War-Era Louisiana, and Uncivil, Sex and Violence in the Civil War South. Her research has been supported by the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the Institute for Advanced Study, and other organizations. Professor Feimster teaches well-subscribed courses on topics including the long civil rights movement, African American women's history, critical race theory, and the women's liberation movement. In recognition of her dedication to undergraduate and graduate teaching, she has also received multiple awards, including the Pourvue Family Award for Interdisciplinary Teaching, the Provost Teaching Award, the Berkeley College Faculty Mentoring Prize, the Afro-American Cultural Center's Faculty Excellence Award in Teaching and Mentoring, and the Graduate Mentoring Award in the Humanities. Again, thank you so much, Crystal, for joining me today. What an amazing career and background. I mean, and we laughed a few minutes ago about, is it the long bio or the short one? And,
Thank you.
It's so inspiring and amazing, especially to see a woman of color, have so many accomplishments in this topic, or in the areas that you've studied. And I'm just so happy to have a chance to chat with you. And I've, everyone I've told about that you would be you're my second guest of the season 2. They're like, oh, everybody loves Crystal. She's awesome. Like, she's amazing. Everybody loves her, and
Well, thank you.
Yes.
And I said this before. I'm really honored that you would have me on the show.
Thank you.
as you said, like I'm busy, but like I feel like this is the work that's important, and I'm glad you're doing it. And of course, I'm always happy to support another sister.
Yes, thank you.
Out here, shaking things up. So
awesome.
So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, and I'm so flattered. And so I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your upbringing in North Carolina. As I mentioned to you before we got started, my parents both grew up in North Carolina. Basically my entire family lives in North Carolina. They're all scattered throughout North Carolina. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about, where you grew up and maybe lead into how it influenced your identity and your academic interests.
Yeah, no, I love that your family's from North Carolina. I'm just gonna.
We might be related.
No, it's possible.
It's possible, right?
And especially because you say your mom is from Wilson, and that's not very far from where my people are.
Interesting.
But I love North Carolina. It's one of the things also that I love about New Haven. As I said, that there are so many Black people in New Haven whose family roots are in North Carolina. Yeah. And they actually know the difference between South Carolina and North Carolina. And there are a few folks here from South Carolina, and they know the difference too, that like everything that happens is in North Carolina.
Yes.
Right? North Kakalaki, as I say, is where it's at. Yes. So that it has made New Haven feel familial and home for me.
Awesome.
And I am a Southerner. I have been in the Northeast I left when I was 22 to go to graduate school. Wow. And I went to New Jersey, and everybody thought I was a country bumpkin.
Yes.
And so I have gone back, before coming to Yale this second time, because I was here as a pre-doc postdoc in the late 90s. I went back to North Carolina and was teaching at UNC Chapel Hill, and my family is still there.
Wow.
So North Carolina, I think about that James Taylor song. Do you know it? In my mind?
Yes,
I can't sing, but I'm on, the song. I'm going to North Carolina. That like North Carolina is who I am. Yeah. It's like, it's central to my identity. And I know that, but I'm not always sure other people know that. It was like, but I realized, people do know. Yeah. Because it's like the first thing that's usually in my bio. It's like a native of North Carolina. It's like I want to claim, my people and where I'm from. And for Black people who have been deprived of a kind of ancestral home, that place really matters to us as people who have been mobile and diasporic. Yes. And so I know that is crucial to my identity. And it's also crucial when you're in the Northeast to own that, because I think there are assumptions about the South. And that when most people think about the South, they think about white people. And that the South is this backward, racist place to liberal Northerners. And that vision, yes, there's a truth to some of that, but that vision erases the kind of longer history of Black people being there and that being our home, and that we don't experience the South as just this racist place, that we experience as family and home. And so it's really important for me to claim that and own it. And I do Southern history. Yes. I might have left the South, but that's where my intellectual life is rooted. As I said, I grew up in a place called Statesville. Now, most people be like, is that where the prison was?
Oh, Jesus.
I'm like, no, in the movies, they call it Statesville.
Right. Yes.
Like the prison. It's like the generic name. And maybe they're real Statesville. But it was a place where kind of meal town meets kind of furniture. Like when people think about North Carolina furniture in Hickory, North Carolina. And, if we go back further, it's sharecropping and slavery and tobacco. But as I said, it's where my family is, where I grew up. Ended up going to UNC Chapel Hill, where I was introduced for the first time to African American history in a kind of classroom setting, intellectual, that a history that went beyond my family history. And, I think I felt like many college students feel every time they arrive to college, like a whole new world's been opened up to them. Yeah. And there's a little bit of anger.
Yeah.
Like, why didn't I know this? Why didn't nobody tell me this, right? That it wasn't until even in graduate school that I was like, oh, all these civil rights leaders. Paulie Murray was from North Carolina. Right. Ella Baker was from North Carolina. Nina Simone is from North Carolina. And maybe Thelonious Monk. But like, there are all these great people who are from North Carolina. And I was like, how did I go through a public school system and not learn this? That I had to go to Princeton, New Jersey, and do research and work with a scholar of African American history to like learn about the place that I came from, like whether it's the Wilmington Race Riot and just things that I had to learn that like when I had to read history and learn, I was like, oh, I grew up in Iredell County. Oh, that is like a home of the Klan in North Carolina, that county, right? But I knew the Klan was there. I knew they threw their news leaflets in our yard because they thought it was white people lived there.
Wow.
But so, and I think that is typical experience for Black people who are in public schools. I think it's typical for white people who are in public schools to not learn the fullness of American history.
Absolutely.
And so that's North Carolina.
Right.
It's where I I sort of was introduced to African American history, became a women's studies and history double major, and then left to go study Southern history with Nell Painter at Princeton.
Wow. That's amazing. And, as you were talking, it's true. Like you're always, if you grew up there, it's in your heart, right? I mean, my parents, they took it with them, when they came here, and a lot of their values, or all of their values, are what they tried to sort of pass down in terms of, family values and connection, and and just they grew up at a time. During segregation, and, so they remember literally being in situations where you couldn't go into certain places, or, it was clearly marked for coloreds only.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, like you said, when people think of North Carolina and they think of the racism that happened first, that's the, I guess, first thought that comes to mind. But thank you for sharing that. And I'm curious, what was it just your personal kind of eye-opening experience when you started college? Like, I didn't learn all of these things going to school, and that's what sort of led you into wanting to be a researcher and so on. Or
I mean, I think my I think when I got to college, like many Black people who are first gen, whose parents, at that point, my mom was single, so, and it was me and my sister, so single parent household, that like, oh, if you're going to college, you're gonna make money,
right? Like, you're gonna do something
important,
yeah,
and that I wasn't going to be a school teacher, right? Because I could do that at the community college in some ways, and so I had this idea, I'm going to be a lawyer. There's three categories: lawyer, doctor, Wall Street. I don't know, even though that just wasn't part of the culture of a place like UNC Chapel Hill when I went there. It's so much a part of the culture here. But I just thought, I'm not good at science, so that ain't gonna happen. I'm just lucky to get through whatever A math. And so I was like, I'm gonna major in humanities, and I'm gonna go to law school. And in my mind, I thought I would be a civil rights lawyer, or I would be a women's rights lawyer, but I'm gonna go make a difference in the world. And got to UNC, and I took a history class. It was like a women's history class, and we had to interview our people, our family. I don't remember. I interviewed my great grandmother, my grandmother, and my mom. And so, and it was like a women's history, and I wrote this paper about Black women's history. And I talked about my great-grandmother growing up on sharecropping, my grandmother being a domestic, my mom like struggling as a single parent, had started out working in a sewing factory because she was very young when she had me and my sister 15, my sister 16 with me. She quit high school. Eventually went back to get her, went to community college to get a BS in computer science and really
that's awesome.
make her way. And my dad, very different, right? Also had to drop out, but living in the world that he was living in as a Black man and struggled in and out of incarcerated. Drugs were pretty bad in the 80s and 90s, and he was part of that moment. So my mom ended up being a single parent for a while for me and my sister. And so when I did this paper on her, it put my family history in the context of the longer history of enslavement and Jim Crow, and just coming to terms with what my mom was, that she had done, like each generation was doing better than the next. And for me and my sister to go to college, 4-year college, that was like a big deal. And that teacher said to me, oh, this is really good paper. Wow. And you should work on this. And you thought about graduate school? And at that point, I was a sophomore. I had no idea what graduate school was.
Right.
I was just like, what?
Yes.
More? No, I don't want to be. I don't want to be a teacher. And she was like, you could be a professor. I was like, no, I don't want to be a teacher. I want to be a lawyer. But sort of was on the radar of a few faculty members, women's historians in the department. And I had work study. So I worked in the women's studies office as a work study student. And then I remember I had my first Black professor, and she was like, oh my God, and she did women's history. She was a Black woman. She was young, from Florida, had gone to Duke, and she was just like, it was clear to her that her vision was to create a pipeline. And she was like, you should do this internship at the MLK Papers Project at Stanford, and I will support you. And I was like, no, I'm going to stay here in North Carolina.
Not flying anywhere.
I got a job as like a RA for the summer program, like because I was Black first year. They had like a summer bridge program for kids who were Black and Native and Latinx, that if we to make sure we didn't struggle. Take a math, take an English in the summer before. We'll teach you about the library and the services. And I had done that. And I was like, I'm going to be an RA for that.
Really?
I mean, now they tease me because these are all scholars. And I was just like, no, I'm not doing that. And then she was like, you understand, I'm telling you that this would be a huge opportunity. And I was like, I know, I got a plan. I got to make money. I know,
it's like we can't.
Because I remember saying, will I get paid?
Yeah.
She was like, I mean, I'm sure there's a stipend or something. I was like, well, how much?
Right.
And where would I live?
The motivation, right?
And I was like, because I'm all set with this RA thing.
Yes, right.
And so ultimately, there were people who were actively mentoring me and recruiting me. And it took me a while to come to terms, which I think most young people who are intellectually minded and who want to teach and who want to pursue their intellectual interests, that oftentimes they see a disconnect between activism and social justice and what academics do. And at some point, I didn't do it after my sophomore year. I didn't do that. I didn't apply for that internship at Stanford. Okay. But as I said, the people mentored me and educated me about different pathways. And so between my junior and senior year, I did do the internship at the King's Papers Project at Stanford. And I was like, I remember calling my mom. It's like, everything's so expensive. Can you, she was sending me canned tuna and ramen. I was like, it just costs so much more here, right?
Yeah. Oh, wow.
But it was a moment where I realized that to be a scholar did not mean I was not an activist, that I wasn't going to have the power to change the world or think about the world. Yeah. And that I felt that I owed it. If I went back to that paper, that I owed it to my mom and my grandmother and my great-grandmother to lift up their voices and to make sure that they were part of this sort of larger history of what it means to be American, what is good about America, what's hard, and that we needed to be a part of that story, and that work would make it easier for the next generation. So, my family is really important. The fact that, I had a community of people who were invested and had a mission.
Had a mission to make sure that that you succeed and that hopefully you pass that on to your family members. And it's so true. Again, just as you're talking, I'm like, that's my parents all the way. It's like, you do better than we did. And, it also made me think about just this last year, I finished a leadership program here at Yale called Emerge at Yale.
Right. Oh, congratulations.
And, thank you. And it was an amazing experience. Where we were able to, talk to university leaders and, talk about Yale's mission, but also sort of get to know one another, my folks in my cohort and our backgrounds. And what was really interesting, the final day of the program, we had we just had sort of a talk about did we ever envision that we would be here today? Literally, the question came up, would your ancestors, do you think they would ever imagine that you would be working at Yale and, be managers or be leaders or whatever? And it really struck me because I was like, wow,
what was your answer? You were their wildest dreams. They had dreams for us.
And it's like, wow, that really stuck with me because, growing up, my parents always pushed me, constantly, to a point where it was annoying, right?
And they could see your full potential. I do feel that my mom always advocated for me and could see my full potential. And even when other people didn't, she fought for me to be in, I went to a predominantly white elementary school, public school, in the South in the, late 70s, early 80s. And, she had to fight, to make sure that I could be in AP courses and have the teacher say I wasn't capable and her to say, well, then fail her if she's not capable, but she's going to be in this class, right?
Yeah. Wow.
And to really advocate for me when I was mistreated. And so I couldn't I was not that person.
Yeah.
Like, I was the person to like, let me just get by.
Just kind of get by.
Like, I know these white people racist, but I got plans.
Yes.
Right?
Like, just get through, get through it.
Let me just get through this. Yeah. Like, don't go rocking the boat, Mom.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, and she was like, and I remember one thing, things had gotten to the point at my high school where, I was the only Black kid in many things, and I was the only Black kid in my drama class. And everybody was racist. Teacher was racist. They were just racist. There was no way that they weren't going to be. And I was always the butt of their jokes. Like, oh, you can be the tar baby and you can be this. Like any race. And they would tell racist jokes in front of me because, well, Crystal, you're different, right? Wow. And I just wouldn't say anything because the teacher was, and and at that point, I did think I was going to go to art school and that I was going to be a theater person. And so I was like, I got to get through drama because I want to go to the North Carolina School of Arts. And then I had gone to a banquet, and I also wanted to be student body president. I had plans. And I ended up being student body president. That's awesome. But I was just like, I'm going to be the first Black student body president. And I'm on the sports team. I'm head of, I had a plan.
You had dreams, yeah.
And my mom had supported that. And I was like, their racism is not going to get in the way of me not getting what I want. But things got to the point when I had gone to awards banquet and I came, and it was like at the Howard Johnson. And all the staff is Black, like the serving staff was Black, and we had a banquet room, and I was late. I'm the only Black person, and I sit down, and the white kid, who's actually the student body president at that time, says, "Oh, Crystal's here. I thought you was the help." And then everybody started laughing, and then, when they started to bring out dessert, they are giving out, whatever, the pie or whatever. And somebody said, "Oh, don't give Crystal any. She should give her a moon pie and RC cola." And, in my mind, I'm like, I know this is racist. Yes, I don't know the bad, but I didn't. And then it's one white girl beside me, she said, and the teacher was laughing. Everybody was laughing. And she said, "This isn't right. Why do you guys do this? Like, this is racist. Like, this is not right." And I got up and left because I didn't want, I ain't trying to have no say. They might lynch. I don't know. I know. And I went to the bathroom and I started crying, and the other girl came and she was like, "Why do you let them treat you this way?" Wow. And I was like, because I'm one person in a class, in a school where everybody's white, and like, I don't have a choice. And then the teacher came in and she was like, to the other girl, "You've upset everybody, and we're not racist, and you need to come back and apologize, and you and Crystal need to come back in and apologize because this is not acceptable."
Oh my goodness.
And at that moment, I was like, I got a limit.
I know, yeah.
Like, I will let you be a fool, but I will not let you make me participate in that foolishness. Right. So I was just like, I'm not apologizing. Yeah. And we left. And I had to call, like, Christy took me somewhere. She's like, "We're going to go to a softball game," because we were, in high school. Yes. And I called my mom from a payphone, and I said, "I just want you to know I left the banquet. I'm with Christy. We at the softball game." "Why you leave the banquet?" I was like, "Because, they said some stuff." Right. And she was like, "What? What did they say? And what have they been saying?" And then I started telling, like, "Oh, they do that." And she was like, You need to come home now."
Oh, wow. Your mom was upset with
you.
you.
She was bad. And I was like...
So she was upset that you left.
She was upset that I had been tolerating...
all of that.
And I had told her that, like, who like, when I came home and I said they've been doing... And she was like, "That's not acceptable." And
so she didn't know that you'd endured all of this stuff.
But she said, "I'm going to go to the school tomorrow." And she said, because she was mad that I hadn't told her. Yeah. But she understood why I had not said anything.
Wow.
And she said, you don't have to fight this battle.
Yeah.
Our generation fought this battle so you wouldn't have to.
Wow.
But I'm going up there. And I was like, please don't go. Like, I begged her not to go. And eventually she said, I will do what you want me to do, but I will tell you, if you do not if I don't go, then I can't help you. I can't support you. Like, when it gets like you're telling me that I can't do what I need to do as your mother.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, you can go. And of course, like, why I didn't want her to, because I had to quit drama. Like, I just knew these people weren't gonna, like, they said they were sorry, but they basically said, this is your mom's issue. And, we're good white people, and she's thinking about the past, all of that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the lesson for me was, I don't have to tolerate this.
You don't have to tolerate it.
And that my mom had to model that for me.
Yeah.
And that was how I moved forward from then. Like, I don't have to tolerate people's bullshit. And their racism is their problem. It is not my problem.
Yeah.
And I can call them on that.
Yeah.
And that's what I got from my mom, right? That, like, you can be whoever you want to be, but you're going to have to keep some doors open, and people aren't going to make it easy for you.
They're not going to make it easy.
And you're going to have to make choices and sacrifices. And sometimes when you speak truth to power, you lose, right?
Yeah.
And so then it is amazing when we find ourselves in these places and at the table, and the potential to be part of what makes this place great, but also what has made it, that it wasn't made for us, right? It wasn't built to support our dreams and who we want to be, right?
Yes.
But once we're in these institutions, we are, like I always say to my students, we are Yale now. Like, you can't be like, well, Yale did, and we are.
We are.
And so what is our
Yale.
responsibility?
Right.
And in some ways, it is to lead. So I'm glad to hear that you did emerge. And, it's part of why I decided to be head of college. I was sitting at a leadership thing yesterday.
Really?
With Peter Salovey and two of the two white women who are presidents of universities who are on the board. And it was like to talk to us about what university leadership looks like as a part of Scholars as Learners, a program that Tamara Gendler is running. And, it was like, it's a whole white panel, right? Two white women, Peter, Tamar. And I look around the room and there's one other Black person. And, no, it's two, because Gary Gladney was there. And then there's another one of my colleagues. And I was like, it is so important for us to be in this space, right?
Yeah.
And to take stewardship.
You're right.
Right?
Yes.
And to represent.
Yes.
But it comes at, I don't want to say it costs, because there's so many benefits, but it means something to be that person in the room.
It really does. So much of what you shared, and thank you for being so candid about that, because a lot of it resonated for me. I mean, I experienced certain things that, in my high school life and college years and into today, where, and I'll share one story. When I was in high school, I was a senior looking at colleges. And
where were you?
I went to, I'm from Connecticut. Right. I went to a private school for high school, not far from where I live. And, there were a handful of kids of color, and when I say a handful out of, I don't know how many kids were in our graduating class. There were probably about almost 200. And there may have been 5 to 10 of us.
Right.
And, it almost became, I hate to say it, because it was almost like we normalized how some of the kids would act or treat us, or little things. And I wasn't like a straight A student, but I was a pretty good student. And, the time came when you start getting all these letters from colleges.
They was mad.
But here's the kicker is that, I was getting all these letters and and I'll be honest, I was naive back then. In terms of, Ivy League schools, I really only knew of Yale and Harvard, like those are the things that everyone talks about.
You were from the Northeast.
Well, yeah, right. Yeah. And so those were the only two schools I knew about. And, I knew about the schools in Connecticut because I had, relatives or, just people I knew who ended up going to Fairfield U and Sacred Heart. My mom worked at Sacred Heart for many years, my sister as well. And, so I knew of those schools. I had done the bridge program at University of Bridgeport, and which was an amazing experience for me, by the way. So those were the schools I knew of, right? And I started getting these letters from...
Asking you to apply.
Asking to apply, like from Brown, George Washington, some schools in... I couldn't tell you the others, but no, now I know, these were good schools. Right. I got one from Harvard. When I approached my guidance counselor. And the thing about it, I hate to speak disparagingly of my high school, but, I felt like if you were introverted or quiet, you didn't get attention.
Right.
The popular kids, the athletes got the attention in terms of, let's guide you, and help you get into all these wonderful schools. I always, I would literally sit there and wonder, how did they get appointment? I'm like, I don't even know, am I supposed to come to you or you come to me or what do I do? Like, how do I talk to you?
This. Yeah.
So I finally figured that out, but that's what bothered me. It's like I had to figure it out. It wasn't apparent to me in terms of what's the process, right? And I'll never forget, I brought some of the letters and I asked like, hey, I got this letter from Harvard. Like that was the one that stood out for me because I said, it's an Ivy League school. Wow. And this guidance counselor told me maybe you should apply for schools that are a little more in your league.
Right.
And I thought, I'm not smart enough.
Right.
Like, you don't think and then I just kind of clammed up because I felt like, well, she must know. Like maybe I'm not smart enough. And to this day, I even get emotional about it because it's like, how dare you
kill somebody's dream,
kill someone's dream and affect my journey. And so I never said anything. I didn't tell my mother.
Right.
I didn't tell because I felt like at the same time.
Ashamed and embarrassed.
I was ashamed and embarrassed. And then I was wondering like, well, maybe my parents can't afford it. I don't want them to feel bad if I get it. What if I got accepted and then they can't afford it?
Right.
So maybe I'll just stick to the schools around here.
Right.
And, they gave me pretty decent financial aid. So, I did that. But yeah, it's,
it's real.
It's real.
I feel
right?
like the struggle is real. I always say that.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like the struggle's real.
The struggle is real.
Like, even though we might be here,
right?
It didn't come
easily.
And even when it was easy, it was hard.
Right.
That, like, there are many things that like I feel like I went through this thing in my high school, but at the same time I did become student body president. Like that, like not all the white people.
It didn't hold you back.
But it's hard.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that happened to you.
Thank you.
And I always worry, like I feel like my kids are at a private school and the counselors are all about, and I know that they want to say the things and all the things, but I'm like, my kids, anything, the world is open to you.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
And so I know that I am a force. I am the force that they have to reckon with. It is not the guidance counselor at the end of the day.
Yes.
And that's what my mom made me feel like. I'm the force that you have to reckon with.
Yes.
And I'm going to have your back. I'm going to be the winds in your sail. But it took a lot for me to own that.
Yeah.
And it came it's like for you, like I'm sure you own that with your parents.
Yes.
But there are those moments where you feel undeserving.
Right.
And so you didn't tell them. But like I didn't tell my mom for a year and a half.
Yes.
Right?
I never said anything.
And like if you wait a year and a half, like it's all bets are off, right? When you're applying for college, at that moment, timing matters, right?
It does,
and so for me, that moment happened when I was a junior in high school, and I was like, oh, right. This is not, I don't have to feel ashamed or embarrassed. I have to like let my mom own this for me. And so we have to do that for our kids, and we have to do it for the college students.
Exactly.
But they have to also be ready.
They have to be ready. Yeah.
And, you know.
Yeah.
We have to be ready, and it's like, and that's sad.
Right.
It's like having to talk with your
know,
kids.
yes.
Like, you got to be ready for when the cops come.
Right.
You have to be ready when that moment catches yourself that you're ready to like,
that you understand how
the lines are going to be drawn here.
Yeah. That like you said, teaching your kids how to handle certain situations and preparing them. Like, if you ever get pulled over, like this, these are things you know. And like you said, it makes me sad sometimes because I have two boys.
I do too.
And you know, the fact that I have to explain to them, this is how you may be perceived, so this is how you have to act.
And move through the world.
Yeah.
No, that's a rough one for me. I feel like we have to be good parents to these boys and tell them, but it makes me feel like a bad parent because I feel like I have interrupted the innocence of their childhood. Yes. Right? And I remember I'm in a mixed race marriage. My husband is white. My son, like we were parked because we now live on Park Street. We park in that Howe Street.
The garage there.
Yes.
I used to park there years ago.
Right. and if you know anything about that side of campus, it's heavily policed. There are police cars everywhere. It's really where the campus meets the city, right? I have students who will say to me they don't walk on Park Street because they're afraid. And so, you know, one night we had gone out, we had parked, and there's that pathway that's kind of dark between the buildings. Yeah. It's like I think I know the one you're talking about. And you come down.
I literally was talking to a friend because I worked at AYA. Right. So there's a path that's on, oh gosh, what street is that on? Let's see. Because there was a pathway that led from the Affiam house. Yes. Like through there.
Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Like a lot of people. Yeah. And so we were walking, my husband and I, and my son had run ahead. But then he came back and he was running at us like he was going to attack us. But being a 13-year-old kid. Oh, okay. But okay. I was like, stop it. Like, you cannot do that. Like, wow. I just had this vision of like the police seeing him running at us. My husband is a white man, and that like this is a black kid who is, and they might shoot you. Like that's like what's and my immediate response was like, real. Don't do that. And he's like, what is it? And I was like, you cannot do that. Yeah. Like you can't. You don't get to pretend. Like, and then we got in the house and he was crying, and I was like. And Danny's like, what is happening?
Right.
My husband. Yeah. And I'm like, you are a black boy child. Yes, they will shoot you.
But it's real, right? And
then I felt horrible. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And you should be able, but I'm afraid. Yeah. And so then my fear makes me like this. I felt in that moment like a bad parent. Really? Who was like thinking, I want to make my kids safe, but that. But I also don't want, like he was scared of me in that moment, right? He wasn't scared of the police. He's like, what's wrong with
what's wrong with mom? Yeah. So, it's hard. I mean, now, so my older son is 20 now, and but he's starting to get it now. But there was a time period because he loved or still loves. He loves fashion, and he loves to do and I said, yeah, you can't.
I know my kids got the Timberlands and the jeans, and I'm like, don't let them hang down.
Right. Don't let them hang down.
And like, don't be walking around with that thing on you. The info and the hoodie. Like, and he looking at me like, are you?
No, it's because you're profiled.
And I was like, but it reads a certain way. Yeah. You cannot be in these streets. Yeah. But like, then again, it's like, I think one generation would say we're invested in a politics of respectability. And I'm like, but no, this is a politics of survival.
And survival,
and
right.
that if you understand the sort of deep history of what a politics of respectability was coming out of the 19th century and Jim Crow and Black women not wanting to be raped in alleyways by white men, then the politics of respectability is a form of resistance. It's a strategy. Yeah. It's not about middle-class Black people policing poor Black people, right? That's the way people understand it now. Yeah. But I'm like, poor Black people got politics of respectability, right? Yeah. That whatever's happening in Black communities is about being respected, right? Yeah. And so, again, and I'm like, this is for us, it's like a politics of survival, and that comes at a cost because we're living in survival mode, and I just want to live in the joy of like our Blackness and what we bring to the table instead of like
worrying about, literally your life being taken. Other people's fears, and and like you said, I mean, I do the same with my son. Like if he's out he's driving at night and again going through like, here's what you do, and please don't do that. Like, don't do this, don't do that. Like, let's just but it does make me sad because it's like it takes away some of the, like you said, the innocence of children or just enjoying being a high school kid. But wow, I mean, we could talk about it all day, right?
I feel like we're like okay. In the weeds, I know. But this is what happens
it's
when
true, right?
You connect with somebody and there's a common,
and there's a
common shorthand and language.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that. And that's what, I think that's what has been so great about doing the podcast is learning about how people grew up and, because it really shapes and molds who you are today. And it obviously affected you to the point where like you've devoted your life's work to all of these things. And that's amazing. So I'm wondering, if you could talk about, wow, we covered so much really, I'm looking at my questions and we covered a huge ground, but, yeah, were there other pivotal moments like once you started wrapping up your college years and moving into another direction? Like were there certain figures or people in your life that really influenced where you wanted to pursue?
I feel really lucky in that regard. Like they're like, as I said, my mom is like my first, she's my day one. I have an older sister. Like we're just we're like 13 months apart.
Oh, wow.
So, everybody thinks she look younger than me, but, whatever.
Right.
Nonetheless. So those are they are the two people who've had the biggest influence on me. And then I've moved in a world in which, women and Black women in particular have lifted me up. I was fortunate, as I said, it was a young Black woman historian who said, you should do this project at Stanford. There were other Black women scholars who just basically came in and said, this is what we want you to do, and we will support you. And I was very lucky to end up at Princeton, which is an Ivy League, predominantly white institution, and have a senior Black woman advisor, right? And I knew that like, that would be important to me. And she will joke with me, like she's actually coming back to do a tea.
Oh, wow.
She's got a book coming out, and she's an artist. She retired early, but she would joke and say, but seriously, like, it's not just because I'm a Black woman that that's not what. And I was like, but yes, I know that you don't think of it that way, but it was really important for me to have somebody who was Black and who could understand my experience, right? And who was smart and brilliant and who encouraged me, right?
Right, yes.
And that I could be like her.
Exactly.
Like, I want to be like you when I grow up.
Yes.
And so I was very
important.
lucky to have that.
Yeah.
And there was no, there was no limit at some point on what I could imagine for myself because she was a full professor, a Black woman at Princeton. And I remember at that point when I was in graduate school, Toni Morrison was on the cover of like Time magazine. And then maybe Oprah was after that. And I remember her saying, I can't imagine, I would never have imagined a Black woman on the cover. And I'm like, that's just normal to me, right?
right.
Like I will say, I remember when Obama was elected, I thought I could never imagine a Black president. But for my kids, there's not a world in which there isn't a Black president. Like, so what is possible and what you can imagine is based on the context. And so in the context of seeing Black women in places of prestige and power, allowed me to dream big, right? And to do the work in a way that allowed me to use a kind of Black feminist praxis. So graduate school, I had that support. And when people treated me poorly, I had the support. I have felt lucky that people have said, let me carry the torch for you. Let me carry the water. Let me, because you got bigger fish to fry. And that has been pivotal in the way that I teach and the way that I hold space for my students. That I understand why my students, regardless of race and gender, sexuality, religion, are here to get an education, and that my job is to support them in this phase of their lives to figure out who they want to be in the world. And it's especially important for my Black students and female students and kids of color to make sure that this institution does not distract them from the work that they're here to do. And so that I say, I'll fight that battle for you. You've named it. I will make sure, but you need to go study. The cultural center needs some more money. And you need to, and you can name that, tell the president, go do the protest, but today
you need to
because Yale's gonna be here long ago. If you flunk out, your opportunity is gone. Like I'm gonna help. I'm gonna raise that. I will advocate for you. But if it don't happen on your watch, your goal is to get your education, but I also want to train you to advocate for yourself and to ask for the things that you need and make this place the place you want it to be. But you also have to use it,
do the work, to
get out of here and go the next
that's
step.
Amazing. And you're the first person I've heard to put it that way, where it's like, yes, it's great that students get involved in protests and so on, but like you said, when they mention what their battles are, pass it on to someone who can sort of help remove those obstacles. But like you said, they still need to pass.
They gotta get through here,
right? They still need to pass and get through school. And that's amazing. I love how you put it that way. Kind of leading into, I had some questions about your approach with how you mentor students, because I noticed that several of your awards were for teaching and mentoring. And, like I told you earlier, everyone I mentioned, when I mentioned that you would be one of my guests, they were like, oh, Crystal, everybody loves Crystal. And, the students love you. And, so I'm wondering, how do you, and you've already given me some examples of just what you pull from your own personal experience into how you mentor students. But, are there other experiences that you might have had, like when you were in college, that sort of shaped, whether they were good or bad, but shapes how you approach mentoring students here at Yale?
I mean, I had amazing mentoring. And I sort of talk about my advisor and my mom, and I sought out mentorship. I knew when I had a good mentor and when I had a mediocre one. I learned to ask for what I need, right? So that I think part of being a mentor, part of being menteed is knowing what you need and being able to ask for it, right? And so as a mentor, I had to ask for stuff from my advisor. She wasn't always like, I was like, can I have an extension?
Right.
No.
Right.
And I was like, but okay, let me advocate. Let me tell why you want me to do my best work.
Right. Right.
Like, you might want to give me an extension.
Yeah.
I'm here to do my best work. I need more time, boo.
Yes.
So, like we would have those, but I had to like explain it.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
not like I'm just being like, so what I say to I try to meet my students where they are. And that, like, if I think fundamentally why they are here is to get an education, then my job is to support that. And that means having compassion and empathy. And so I often say, I say to my students, what do you need? What do you need to pass this class, to do this work? I know that my class might not be your number one priority, but for where it is in what you need to do to get through Yale, how do I support you in that? And I try to see my students as whole people. That's gotten much easier. I think I thought I could see the full breadth of my students based on my own humanity and the experiences that I had.
Right.
But in fact, being head of college has made me realize that I didn't really see.
Yeah.
I see them in the sliver of time, and that they're my student in my class.
Right.
But like as head of college, I'm like, oh, right, you're somebody's daughter.
Right.
You're somebody's older sister. You are, working 3 jobs. You're taking 7 classes. Whatever it is that like, and you're trying to have a social life.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't know who you are.
Right.
Like, so in the college, I see it all.
Yeah.
From like their mental health struggles to like their successes. And I want to celebrate them, and I want to, lift them up when they fall down. But it means they're not just a student in my class who after the semester is over, I might see you again. I might not. I've held that space for you. So I feel like I don't want to say winging it, but because I knew the fullness of my own experience, I could hold space for my students based on that, but not based on like what I now know to be their reality.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It was based on my reality.
On your yeah.
And that worked, and it was sustainable. And but I think now I'm just like, oh yeah, this is really important. And to remind my students that the grade isn't the most important thing, and that it's like, what do you want to get out of this class? It can't be the grade.
Right, right.
And let me help you figure that out. Yes. What's the skill set? Is it that you want to become a better writer? You want to learn how to read documents? That you want to figure out how do you mobilize this history for social justice and change, right? So that has been, for some students, when they took my long civil rights course in 2015, and they were part of the push for the name changing and more resources. They were students who were AFM majors who were in long civil rights movement, and they were thinking about, well, how do we strategize? How do we create alliances with the Asian Cultural Center, the Latinx? Why is that so difficult? Why do coalitions break down? Right. That's what we want to understand. So can you focus on that? They wanted to know, like I often say, my colleague Linda Gilmore and I were teaching about Pauli Murray before anybody knew, like, to think about Pauli Murray, because we were both from North Carolina. Yes. We were both historians. We'd both been at UNC Chapel Hill. Her advisor was my advisor. That was Glenn. And we taught Pauli Murray because we were like, and she was here at Yale.
Wow.
So when the name change came down, those students who had long gone wrote to us and said, we want a college to be named after Pauli Murray, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, like, I feel like my job is to give the students what they need.
Yeah.
And, so that they got this education and they mobilized it, right?
Right.
So I often open my classes and I say, this class can be many things. But it has to be a call to action. And you get to decide what that action is. Maybe it's that I'm going to come to class I ain't going to miss a single class.
Right.
And that's what it means to you.
Right.
For some of you, it is like, this is my moment to think about what are my commitments to racial and gender equality and social justice, right? And what are you going to do after this class? How is this knowledge going to serve you besides a letter grade on your transcript? And you have to think about that. And I can help you. And there are times where people are like, can we make this an education, give it a cross-listing for education? Because I want it to be seen as part of my training to become a school teacher. I'm like, yeah, I can give it a ed number. And then once I did that, I was like, well, what? So then I changed the projects, the assignments. You have to write a children's book about civil rights or women's rights activists.
Wow.
Here are the guidelines instead of a final paper. As students became more, that I wanted to do more public facing, I changed the assignment to a podcast, which Ryan said he helped me with my students.
Interesting.
So that I try to meet the students where they are. And there was a generation where I had an iPad in the class and you had to do like a story. And that was when the Ferguson stuff was happening. And they had to kind of think, how would you report out what's happening on campuses and what's happening in cities around the Ferguson protests?
Wow.
So there are ways where I kind of try to gauge where they are. And if you're doing Black studies, whatever you're doing is always in the news.
Yeah, there's always something.
It's some headline. Is it Charleston? The shooting one year I came back. The monuments coming down. And so I did a project on monuments. So So I think that students appreciate that, like, my course isn't about just consuming knowledge, but how do you want to consume that knowledge and produce new knowledge and mobilize it, whether you're going to Wall Street or you're going to teach in an inner city public school. How is this knowledge going to serve you and change the world, right?
That's amazing.
And I think my students appreciate that. And it makes me feel like, makes me happy because I feel like I'm a scholar activist and I can model for them, and that I might not be the one out in the streets. I might not be the one telling Wall Street how to do its DEI, but my students are going to come up in there and they're going to be like, okay, look, let me tell you.
Yes. And you're giving them the tools to go out into the world and do these things, which is amazing. Which is why it is so important to have someone like you, helping them with their obstacles, but also being a person of color and a woman of color, to show us like that you're modeling what they would like to be doing out in the world, and
optics
amazing.
matter.
It does. It really does.
I remember there was a mentoring program for junior faculty, and I can't remember who initiated, but it was up on Science Hill in one of those houses. And I was going in, and I was one of the first people that got there. And there was a white woman who opened the door. And when I came in, she was like, oh, if you're here to set up the food and the coffee, if you're from down, you can go into the back and do that. And
that was here?
Yeah, was it? Yeah. And I said, well, actually, I'm one of the faculty members.
Yes.
I'm here for the thing. Right. And she was like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. And I use that as I teach critical race theory. I haven't taught in a while, but I remember when that happened that year, I said, okay, this is what I want. I want you to think about race. And so I said, I'm going to tell you this scenario. This thing happened. And I said, I went in and I said, so what do you make of that? Let's process it. And they're like, oh, she's racist. And I was like, that's one way to read it. But what does it tell you about Yale? Think for a minute. Why would she make that assumption? And and then I kind of break it down to him. I say, there was a 90% chance that she would have been right. I said, because one, she may not be racist. She just might not. She hasn't seen any Black professors. Yale does not have a lot of Black professors. Yeah. We have a lot of Black people working in dining. And that is where she sees Black people. So the assumption was So I said, you have to think about the context, right? What needs to, so if we focus on her and we say, oh, she's racist. She shouldn't be working here. That actually doesn't change the lay of the land. If we acknowledge that she made that assumption because most of the Black people are in dining and there are no Black faculty, then what needs to change? Yale needs to hire more Black faculty so that when Black people are recognized at every level as professors, as administrators, as managers, not just dining and janitorial staff. And I'm not saying those are bad. I wasn't offended. I said, my grandmother was a domestic. My other grandma's a cafeteria worker. I don't have shame in that. That is work that is dignified. But if I had shame about it and it was just about her being racist, then we missed the point about how these things are systemic and that where you go in to make the change, right? I never see that woman again. I don't care about that woman, but I care that Yale is a place where people can't recognize us as professors, as managers. And that is the work of representing, right? It's not just enough to occupy the space. Optics matter, but also getting people to understand why they matter.
Yes, exactly. Oh man, I could talk to you for hours. and
I could too.
I know. I mean, this is really interesting. We'll have to do lunch or something soon.
Well, that's easy.
Yeah, I know, right?
Get it covered. I always say to people, I do stop for lunch, and so that is an easy thing to happen.
We should definitely do that.
And I should have you in Pierson. I don't know if you've eaten in the colleges yet.
I have here and there in different colleges, but I would love to.
Yeah. You got to come to Pierson because it is the best college.
Yes, everyone. It's
on campus. I'm going to look at the camera. Y'all hear that? Pierson Nights. So I'll have you over there. And if you're not a fellow of any other college, I would love to have you become part of our community. But if you're a fellow at another college.
No, I'm not actually.
Good.
And that's another thing that I've always been like, how, I always, some of my colleagues, I'm like, how do you become a fellow? I don't know. What's the process? And
you can ask. People can ask you, but it's like the mystery, right?
Yes.
Who gets it, the invitations. And, faculty are always automatically invited.
Okay.
And then, some people who are administrators and they know the world of Yale and were undergraduates here or graduate students, they know that I could go to so-and-so
and become a fellow
and ask, right? But it's, and it's not a guarantee.
Right.
But, as a head, I'm always asking people, you want to be a fellow?
Yes.
And you're not supposed to recruit fellows because, if they're in another college.
Right. No, I'm not.
It's a whole process.
Yeah.
So that's why I said, are you in another college?
I'm not. And thank you. I'm flattered and thank you for the invitation. I would love to. Thank you. So, like I said, I could talk to you forever. Which was really nice. It was nice to connect on that level. And I knew immediately when I saw your bio and you mentioned, and it mentioned North Carolina, I was like, oh, she's like family. So,
thank you.
But really, because my parents are still, my dad passed away in 2019, but, they are, North Carolinian. I don't know what
that's it.
Is that
North Carolinians,
at heart. You know what I mean? Like they live it. So what I'd love to do is wrap up by talking about, you do so much. And I almost want to say for some women, not all women, but I think that we just take it all on, right? You're doing the research, you have a family, you're teaching, you're head of college. Amazing. And it's like, how do you juggle all of that? And I'm kind of leading into just self-care. Like how do you do it and still maintain that balance and get done what you set out to do?
It's hard. I'll just start with that.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm sorry, I'm not looking at it anymore, but I'm thinking
right.
that it's ironic in the sense that, like, yesterday when I was at this leadership, like, the question that I asked was like, okay, you're two women and you're leaders. You know, Peter was on the panel too. And I said, there's a part 2 for Peter, but like, what are the challenges of being female leaders?
Yeah.
And you're all very busy. Like, how do you manage that work-life balance? I said, I know it's a cliche question, but it's a question.
It's real,
and
though.
maybe balance isn't a real thing. But and I know, Peter, I'm asking you that question because you have to manage it. You know, they gave me some answers. But one said there's no such thing as balance. The two women said, I could have spent more time with my kids, but they're wonderful people, and and they love me and they're proud of me, and and when I did spend time with them, I gave them 100%. That kind of stuff, and. And then I had to think, like, well, how do I answer that question? And, balance is a kind of, it's kind of like the magical thing. If I could just find it.
Right. Extra hours in the day,
Yeah, and so it's like, do I want to give up on that, striving for that? But at the end of the day, I'm like, what are my priorities? And those can shift, right? So for a very long time, my priority was my kids. Like, I did not want to be the parent whose kids were in daycare to 5:30, 6:30. My kids are going to get picked up at 3:00. We're going to have dinner together every night. That was, so that it wasn't about balance. It was like, that's my priority. It meant that, and teaching was like my next priority. My scholarship was not always a priority. Like that, like, I don't have 7 books, right? Like that was a choice that, like, I needed to write a book to get tenure. I want to write more books, but for at least 13 years when my kids were little, that was the priority. And that if I was working towards balance, then I would have struggled to do both of those things.
Wow. And
not do any of it well. Right? Yeah. And so I just was like, I'm going to do the best I can as a teacher. And that meant I was busy all the time. But I have no regret that, like, as this working woman who is a career minded, that my choices and my commitments have always been about my family. I didn't want to be in a commuter marriage, that my husband and I made choices and sacrifices, that, he was a spousal hire at UNC Chapel Hill. I was a spousal hire here. It meant giving up tenure and starting all over. But I knew that, like, for our family, what was most important, right? And that would always be the thing. And I felt like I could become head of college because my kids are 13 and 18. And that could be a priority in a way because they don't need me as much, right? And I postponed that for, like, I could have done it. And I said, well, my son is a junior and we got to get him through his junior year so that he can be ready for college. I can't do it this year. Roll back. Come next year. And I need this leave and I need to make a little bit more progress on an article or a book. But, like, I have been very clear about what's important for me. And so my advice to people about, like, how do you find balance? It's like, what do you prioritize? What are your commitments? And, say yes to the things you love, because I struggle because people are like, you don't say no. You don't say no. You need to learn how to say no.
Right. I know. Like, that's been a common theme, right?
Yeah. So I'm just like, well, how do I say yes to the things I love?
That you love, right?
And how do I own those choices? And know that, like, you're giving up something, right? Because if you're constantly working for balance, you don't have to give up anything. Right. And you do. Yeah. And you're giving up time with your kids, or you're giving up time on your scholarship, or you're giving up time on the work you want to do in the community. And that's okay. Just own that and choose it. And the self-care for me is you when you with your kids all the time, you need some care. Like, I'm not going to like, we might think it's just because you're out here working all day.
Right.
Like, how you going, is it a glass of wine at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Right? Whatever.
It's wind down time, right?
And
like
so
somehow.
I like TV.
Yeah.
I'm going, like, I love to binge some stuff. And at the end of the day, it is like a bath, and don't like whatever series is gonna like
just kind of suck you in for a while.
And I love to walk. I love to run. I get sick. And then when I get sick, I'm like, you have to stop.
You have to stop. Yeah. And take time for yourself. Yeah.
And so I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish we could talk longer. I want to, it's like I want to continue the conversation, and I hope to continue to get to know you. It's been such a pleasure, just talking to you today and having this conversation and getting to hear about your background. Because, I went through all of your not all of it, but, I went through your bio and I mean, it's a lot. Like, you've done so much, and it's really interesting just to hear who you are as a person. And I just appreciate you taking the time to share with me today. So I really, we're going to conclude the episode. And again, thank you so much, Crystal, for making the time. And you brought up so many wonderful points. And I think it just, to wrap it up, it's so important to keep that dialogue open amongst each other, amongst our groups, and reflect on conversations, like you said, talking to your students about different experiences you've had. They jump to a conclusion, but when you really start to think about it and dissect it, there are other issues that we really have to think about. So I just want to encourage our listeners to do the same thing and just keep the conversations going, and yes, I thank you so much. I can't tell you enough how I appreciate it. And I'm going to sign off here. So, just awesome conversation, Crystal. So thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.